Here is a presentation about IT application projects. It is created by Amy Law based on her experience in managing IT application projects. We will give an introduction about Amy Law and her experience on IT application projects. Her IT application projects include the scanning of land files into an electronic repository, user account management using SharePoint Workflow, information management using Office 365, retention schedule indicator update on LiveLink, SOX compliancy, and identity access management using ServiceNow. Hey, this is Amy Law, your presenter. I have been working in IT for over 20 years in pipelines, energy regulator, oil and gas, utilities, transportations, and telecommunications. I have managed projects for over 15 years in IT applications and infrastructure, system and data migration, cybersecurity, ECM, SAP, process improvement, and office facilities. In terms of education, I completed bachelor and master in computer science from the University of Calgary. I received my PMP in 2006. I also completed certifications in project management, change management, ISO 27001, information security management system, and ITIL. One of my most interesting IT application projects is the scanning of land files project. My client had over 356,000 confidential land papers residing in 6,000 paper folders in unlocked cabinets at the office. This led to data security risk and other potential office disasters, such as flood and fire. A project was initiated to scan all relevant land paper documents to electronic files and import them with metadata to a centralized repository. The project objective was to improve the search of the land files and ensure data security and backup capability to minimize data loss. I managed the project from initiation to closing. Specifically, I managed 3 vendors, West Canadian, Bentley, and Iron Mountain, from finalizing statement of works to delivery. The West Canadian vendor followed the business file structure and metadata requirements to scan paper documents to electronic files. The Bentley vendor updated the ProjectWise tool to import the electronic files with metadata. The Iron Mountain was the physical storage for the land paper documents until the retention schedule expired. Last but not least, I also managed the internal staff to update the land and GIS systems, enabling the ease of file search using metadata, such as the land location. We cleansed 356,000 land papers. We scanned and archived over 200,000 land papers, total to over 170 boxes. We imported the electronic files to the centralized repository with metadata using the Bentley importer. The digital transformation enabled the authorized users to search land files based on the business file structure right at their computer. To better use of the office space, we shipped the archive papers to Iron Mountain for safekeeping until the retention period expired. We also disposed duplicated and irrelevant documents. Last but not least, we removed cabinets to reclaim the office space. Here is a highlight of the scanning of land files project lessons learned. A number of positive findings were identified. They are meant to be repeated in the future projects. The use of a burn-down chart was deemed to be useful. A burn-down chart is a graphical representation of work left to do versus time. A picture is worth 1,000 words. This was a great indication of how well the project is doing to scan the land paper documents into digital files. We started with 170 boxes, with a target to scan 30 boxes per week. As such, the project scheduled the timeline for a 6-week scanning. The graph provided an informed progress and status at any given week. Digital transformation provided a high return on investment, enabling authorized users to search for land files quickly at the comfort of their workstation. The users did not have to pay a visit to the file room. This increased user productivity. This also enabled efficiency during the pandemic, in which authorized users can search for the files without being at the office. Since the land files were converted to electronic, multiple authorized users could access the same files at the same time. This enabled user productivity because users did not have to queue up to view the same file at the cabinet. The move of the paper files to Iron Mountain and removal of the cabinet enabled the department to reclaim office space for better use. Here is a number of negative findings, and these situations should be minimized and/or avoided in the future projects. User role and access permission should have been identified at the beginning of the project, at the requirements gathering stage. When we finished the scanning, access to ProjectWise was not clear, and it took a bit of time to have it reviewed and granted. Software guide, installation guide, and sustainment guide were not available. It would be a quick IT acceptance and sign-off if the documentations were available at the time of scanning land files. Detailed processes and procedures for courier pickup, scanning, and returning of the boxes were not documented. It would be a quick business acceptance and sign-off if the processes and procedures were documented and communicated at the time of the scanning of land papers. My client was lack of efficient tool and process to handle user account requests such as provisioning, role changes, and termination. My client usually had about 20 new hires per month. Some of the new hires were staff, and some of them were contractors. Just prior to summer, my client could hire as many as 40 summer students at any one time. In addition, there were always changes in roles through promotion or moving to a different department, leading to a change of user access permission. Last but not least, some users may leave the company as a result of resignation or layoff. These changes must be handled on a timely fashion. However, my client was lack of efficient tool and process to handle user account requests. This opens a door to security risk on data and access permission. A new project was initiated to improve user account management using electronic forms, automated workflows, and processes to reduce the service request cycle time. I managed the project from initiation to closing. We capture business requirements using swim lane diagrams and traceability matrix. With the swim lane diagrams, we could easily see who is doing what and when so that we can adjust the workflows to reduce the cycle time. We configure the SharePoint so that it enables the visibility of the workflow status. We also engaged procurement on a single source justification so that we were able to quickly work with a selected vendor to finalize statement of work for tool configuration. As a result, we were able to reduce service request cycle time leading to a higher user productivity. We also enable immediate user account deletion for user departure, securing data integrity, and managing access permission. The visibility of the workflow status enabled the quick follow-up using the automatic SharePoint email notification. Here is a highlight of the user account management project lessons learned. A number of positive findings were identified. They are meant to be repeated in the future projects. This project actively engaged administrators from different departments. Since each department had their business requirements and definition of the role changes, it was critical to understand each one so that a consistent workflow can be used across the company. The administrators were supportive to participate through requirements gathering and user acceptance testing. We couldn't have done it without the administrators. SharePoint offers custom workflows that automatically change the status of the document, showing it is in progress, approved, or rejected. In addition, the SharePoint workflows enabled the higher authority to manage activities. This process prevented decision-making bottlenecks. The SharePoint Standard Report enabled the users to see the workflow status. Since this was the SharePoint standard features, there was no time or effort to create the report, leading to project time and cost saving. Here is a number of negative findings, and these situations should be minimized and/or avoided in the future projects. Technology selection took time. Since there were many tools available, it took time to evaluate, prototype, and approve the tool. The better way to approach this situation was to identify a selection criteria upfront and a list of potential workflows. Using the criteria, each potential workflow will be assessed equally and fairly. This would help the senior management to land on its technology quickly. Another negative lessons learned was the process exception. When user account must be removed immediately, the automated workflow would not be used. Instead, the immediate user deletion would be fallback to manual intervention. This process exception could be challenged because the decision-making to remove a user account may not be recorded, impacting the accuracy of the audit trail. Information management project is a common project in many organizations. My client faced a few challenges as a result of the immature information management. This include the broken search, lack of record retention and disposition impacting compliancy, insufficient taxonomy and metadata, and confusing workflows. A project was initiated to implement content management solution integrated with record management solution. This also include user training to improve the understanding and maturity of information management. The project objective was to enable a solid information management to meet the regulatory compliancy. I worked closely with director, managers, and various teams to manage project scope, schedule, budget, resources, risk, quality, communications, and procurement. We prepare the business areas on content cleanup and migration to SharePoint Online. We tackle and classify risk with probability and impact to enable management to make an informed decision and account for sufficient contingency. We also develop decision summaries for project alignment with various groups. Through the RFP process, the project selected a technology vendor to complete a number of technical workshops and pilot. The project completed the initiation, planning, and pilot execution successfully. Due to the company acquisition and split, this project was canceled before go live. Here is a highlight of the information management project lessons learned. A number of positive findings were identified. They are meant to be repeated in the future projects. Technology on information management was leading edge at the time. To manage the technical risk, the project leveraged a feasibility study and executed a pilot before landing on a technology. This was a small investment upfront. The investment identified new opportunities, provided valuable information about options, improved project focus on the right solution, and identified a valid reason to undertake the recommendation. The use of a burn-down chart was deemed to be useful. A burn-down chart is a graphical representation of work left to do versus time. A picture is worth 1,000 words. This was a great indication of how well the pilot was going and how many sites were validated and ready for migration. It was essential to review and clean up existing sites before migration to a new platform. This included the cleaning of unwanted sites, outdated workflows, and old contents. The bigger the site, the longer it would take to conduct migration and testing. The ultimate advantage of cleaning up the site before migration was to maximize the destination storage space, minimize the time required to validate the site post-migration, and reduce operational costs to maintain this new site. To be sure we select the right vendor, we conduct a number of professional reference checks. During the reference check, we discuss with the references about their information management implementation. This was a great experience, sharing on how other organizations take the information management to another level. Here is a number of negative findings, and this situation should be minimized and or avoided in the future projects. Although the vendor was local, the vendor resources stayed at their vendor office to configure SharePoint workflows and report. While this was a part of the statement of work, it did not go well with the client, who would prefer the on-site collaboration and interaction. The preferred approach was to retain the vendor resources on site during the configuration to ease the transition to client's operational team. The pilot was successful, proved the technology, but the project was canceled due to the acquisition and split. This was an unexpected event. The good thing from this not-so-good situation was that the signed statement of work had an exit clause. The project was able to exit the contract without penalty with 7-day notice under specific circumstances. Another typical information management project was to update metadata efficiently. My client had to manually update metadata to maintain records management attribute and retention schedule on a regular basis. Due to the new retention schedule requirements, the volume of changes was more than triple, and their schedule to finish the changes was aggressive. The manual update was extremely time-consuming, inefficient, and error-prone. User productivity was directly impacted because they had to devote their valuable time to update metadata one at a time. A new project was initiated to gather detailed requirements on record management and retention schedule changes. The project would implement an add-on tool in LiveLink to complete the batch updates. I managed the project from initiation to closing. We provided a technology enabler to batch update LiveLink items to comply with the new regulation. We also deliver business solutions and ensure compliancy for record management, legal, asset management, and service land. We were able to work with an off-site vendor to deliver technology enabler. This project was completed under budget by 3%, and resulted to 75% return on investment. Here is a highlight of the retention schedule update project lessons learned. A number of positive findings were identified. They are meant to be repeated in the future projects. We had daily status meeting and quick feedback between the client and technical vendor. This encouraged communication and incremental continuous improvement. Working as one strong team, everyone was open, committed, and receptive to constructive feedback. We appreciate contribution from each other. Specifically, the internal team provided metadata requirements. The vendor provided the technology enabler to batch update the metadata. This was a golden combination to achieve a successful project. The project was well defined with the return on investment in mind. The return on investment, ROI, is a ratio written in percentage that measures how well an investment performs. ROI is equal to the gain from investment minus the cost of investment divided by the cost of investment. Here is a number of negative findings, and this situation should be minimized and/or avoided in the future projects. System performance requirements were not clearly identified and documented. Ideally, we should include the requirements on how many objects will be batched update per night. There was a major difference between thousands of objects versus millions of objects. Error handling requirements were not clearly identified and documented. Ideally, we should include the requirements on how to view the errors and exceptions. For example, are the exceptions showing in a file or in a browser? Is the audit trail on who requested the batch update based on user actual name or account login name? In some cases, the account name is a system account, which does not comply with the record management requirements. One of my clients was not in compliance to SOX, leading to a risk of penalty and even imprisonment. To comply with SOX, corporations must retain business record, including electronic record and messages for 5 years. And there must be a segregation of duties between developers and deployers, along with request and approval audit trail. At the time, my client was not keeping all the electronic record and did not have a segregation of duties. The SOX project was initiated to implement process and changes to retain business record and ensure segregation of duties. As such, developers only have permission in the development environment. Deployers have permission in the production environment. I managed the project from initiation to closing. We had 20 people, including project teams and vendors. We hired contractors such as business analysts and change manager to gather requirements and make changes. Since we did not have all of the requirements up front, we applied the agile methodology. This enabled us to gather incremental detail requirements and build 2-week backlog. I built a scrum wall, hosted daily stand-up meeting, and arranged co-location that created team effectiveness and visibility of the project progress. The project was successful. We changed the process, people, and technology to ensure SOX compliancy. We improved control of systems and data changes throughout the company. Here is a highlight of the SOX project lessons learned. A number of positive findings were identified. They are meant to be repeated in the future projects. Agile methodology was defined and applied well in the project. For example, we built a Scrum wall to showcase stories from requirements gathering to development and testing, eventually moved into production. We also hosted daily stand-up meeting. All team members were in a co-location that created team effectiveness and visibility of project progress. The project was successful because it had a strong management support. Specifically, the project was mandated to comply with SOX requirement. Consequences for non-compliance include penalty or even imprisonment. This was a great way to wrap up a project with an appreciation. We celebrated the project's success with a team lunch. In addition, each project team member received a gift of $100 for their effort and contribution. My client had an employees reward program. As such, anyone could be nominated for a gift of $100 or more when their effort and contribution were above and beyond. Here is a number of negative findings, and this situation should be minimized and/or avoided in future projects. Some of the systems were not kept up to date. As such, they were obsolete and no longer supported by the vendor. They could not keep business record, and they were lack of separate access permission to meet the segregation of duties. It was a difficult situation as we had to make a decision to either upgrade this outdated system to handle SOX requirements or accept the exception. Organizations should always keep their technology up to date. Change management was another challenge in this project. Somehow, this project was not a business project. Instead, it was initiated as an IT project. The nature of the project may have an IT perspective, but the consequence of the non-compliancy affect the entire company. So this type of project should have been identified from the legal or business-specific project. My client had a security risk in managing user accounts. Specifically, some inactive accounts were not terminated and they were misused. This was due to the lack of a solid identity access management. The access management activities were done manually at my client's site. For example, the operational staff would do multiple button pushes to approve and create user accounts per service request. Since these activities were manual, they were executed inconsistently based on tribal knowledge. Each manual request took about 10 to 20 minutes. These activities could have been automated with detailed audit trail and report. Another issue was the lack of end-to-end documented processes to indicate the steps and department to create user account and terminate user account. Therefore, the client was not in compliance to SOX. A project was initiated to create the end-to-end processes to document who is doing what and when during the user account provisioning and termination. The project would select and implement a tool to support the processes with automation, audit trail on request and approval, and detailed reporting, leading to SOX compliancy. We engaged the business and IT, including HR, payroll, IT, and infrastructure teams to create swimlane diagrams to describe the end-to-end processes for user account provisioning and termination. We also leveraged an evaluation matrix to assess technological options. Through the matrix, the project made a tool recommendation. We were able to purchase the tool ServiceNow Integration Hub and started a pilot. At the end, we created end-to-end processes an organizational change management plan. We completed a pilot with the ServiceNow Integration Hub. After the pilot, we negotiated with the vendor to buy ServiceNow Integration Hub at a discounted pricing. The project was approved to move forward. Due to COVID pandemic, the project had to release the contractors, including the project manager and technical writer. As such, the project was put on hold in the middle of the project executions. Here is a highlight of the Identity Access Management project lessons learned. A number of positive findings were identified. They are meant to be repeated in the future projects. We leverage evaluation matrix to analyze technology options, leading to a recommendation. The evaluation matrix served as a reference when questions arise about priorities, resourcing, equipment, schedule, and funding. Evaluation matrix leverage criteria and score to determine which option was the most appropriate for the organization. Examples of evaluation criteria include price, schedule, project team, equipment, project plan, technical proposal, vendor presentation in written and oral, and so forth. The relative ranking could be ranged from 1 to 10, with 10 being the most important and 1 being not important. Each vendor will be compared on the same criteria. Business team, including HR and payroll, were very interested to promote the automation for user account provisioning and termination. They tried to initiate a similar project a year ago, but did not receive the funding. When this project was approved, the HR and payroll teams were excited to participate in the requirement gathering, leading to a quick turnaround to create and validate the end-to-end processes. Swim lane diagram provided the visibility of who is doing what and when in a process. It was the type of flow chart. It provided clarity and accountability by placing process steps within the horizontal or vertical swim lanes of a particular employees, department, and even system. Here's a number of negative findings, and this situation should be minimized and or avoided in the future projects. As the project charter was finalized, a new project requirement just came up. Specifically, the new requirement was to clean up Active Directory. When this could be a great opportunity to remove terminated accounts from Active Directory, the project was not given additional time or budget. My client decided to reduce the contractor rate by 10% due to the pandemic. Some of the contractors were not happy with the rate reduction and decided to leave before the project go live. The project had to release the contractor. This had an impact to the project resource retention and continuity. Thank you very much for your time. Please contact me for additional project management templates and samples. Here's my contact information.